Hi, I'm André Kuzniarek, Director of Document and Media Systems at Wolfram Research. I'm giving a talk today on updating everyone on where we are with CDF this year. I do that every year, and there's always news to tell and details to learn about. See you at my talk. You know, every year I give a talk on where we are with CDF, it's technology that we put out in the world in 2008. It's been going strong, but certainly changes are coming that affect the way everything works in the web. But let's talk quickly about how we're doing with our release cycles. Actually, this doesn't seem to be saying the right thing here. I wonder why I have perhaps the wrong slide there. What I meant to be saying, of course, is we're now in version 11, and what you're seeing here is what I was saying last year, is that we had been moving our release process into a faster track by essentially taking everything that is Mathematica and making it the player. That wasn't the case in the past because we were dealing with the footprint of the player. We were trying to keep it small as possible, and so we were building it from essentially the opposite direction. We were building it up instead of releasing it from what was being done with Mathematica. And that would throw bugs into the process. Things would get missed. Things weren't quite always working right. And we realized that when you can put gigabytes on a thumb drive, it really isn't that big of a deal anymore that the footprint gets bigger. So we're at the point now where we essentially can release CDF in a matter of 7 days after releasing Mathematica, and that's what we've done this time around with 11.01, and with version 11, the CDF release was 10 days, so we're getting that down to a week. We're probably not going to do any better than that. In terms of the features that have stabilized, there's not really anything technologically new in the player itself that isn't that needs to be spoken of differently than Mathematica. Whatever Mathematica can do, the CDF player is supposed to be able to do for depending on what level of CDF you're producing. But just as a reminder of what we were working on last year and getting sorted this year was the multi-core support. There's the player pro-activation that is in the menus now for the CDF player. Copy and paste had always been kind of finicky, and that's been stable. The years-long requests for repressing the welcome screen when an application you've developed and put on the desktop for your users is opened from that application, then there's no welcome screen for CDF player. Whatever branding you want to put into your application is what the user sees, and that kind of skinning is it's on you at that point. And the connectivity point here is one of the main reasons why the CDF player is built based on Mathematica, because we have to make sure that everything is in the layout that allows for all this different kind of connectivity, and we're always adding more. So, it's I don't quite know what happened to my slide, but when I was putting that first slide together, I was making the point that the Macintosh download size is around 800 megabytes right now. The download size for Windows is a gigabyte, and the download size for Linux is 1.5 gigs. And yeah, that's maybe a little scary. The installed footprint gets bigger from that. Sure, we've all been doing this for a long time, at least maybe half of us in this room. I certainly have. And you could easily balk at that kind of size of things, but when you are getting apps from app stores and like from Apple or anything on your iPad or whatever, you could be buying books that are way bigger than that, and it's not like it's that unusual anymore for these kinds of large data files to go around. All right, so one of the bigger points to be made today is what has been warned about for a while. that plugins are going away. We've known this for a couple years now, and all the major browsers have committed to that. So I've put links in here for any concerns about what is being said about this, but and this talk will be available, of course, so you can look it all up. You know, the story is essentially a game over for browser plugins, and you know, Flash is the one plugin technology that everybody committed to for you know, the kinds of things that they throw on their web pages that include advertising. So it's the sort of thing that's going to be the last to go under, you know, Firefox will allow for Flash to persist for a while, but it's going to be blocked. You've probably already seen blocking messages when you're using the CDF plugin, and that's going to persist with Firefox, but at any time next year, the plugin technology will be gone. It's already gone on Chrome and on Safari by virtue of the fact that this year they had only been supporting 64-bit plugins, and we don't develop past the 32-bit because we knew this was coming. You know, we knew this was going to be over. Microsoft Edge never supported plugins to begin with. So what does that mean for CDF on the web? It primarily means that our cloud, interactives in the cloud have to work. You know, they have to do the right thing. You've probably all experimented a bit with the cloud, you know, want to have confidence in what's coming along with manipulates. I have this little basic toy experiment. It's always the same thing I do, sine wave. You know, this is a cloud interaction here. So I'm moving the slider, and you're seeing the interactivity take place with less delay than you may have seen a while back. We've made significant inroads. I mean, we're talking about cutting it down by, you know, can we get a millisecond there? Can we get 10 milliseconds there? You know, what can we do to optimize? We're constantly working on optimization. And if I was showing this to you a year ago, I would have to move the slider, let go, have it snap, and then boing, the thing would move. Right now, it's keeping up a little bit, you know. But, you know, we have the benefit of the last mile here on the internet being close to home, you know, so you're seeing it about as good as it can be right now. But this is an internet interaction that you're experiencing, or that I'm showing you right here. So that does say something. I keep popping up the wrong window here, sorry about that. Back to this. You know, what are the next steps from here? We're talking about plugins because we're talking about embedding CDF content in the web. And what does that mean? We essentially want to make it as easy as possible, and we can do that now with the cloud as well, for you to have a very simple user interaction. I'll demonstrate the issues on that in a moment, where, you know, you're pushing a button, you're saying, I want this thing to live in my web page. How will I achieve that? And because of putting everything in the cloud now, we're poised to make that simpler than we've ever had it in previous years. And then it leads to the question of, what does that mean for your audience when you are hosting files that require computation time from a server, and it's not your server, it's our server. It's costing us money to host your CDF files, to host your interactives. Anything where you're doing computation on our dime is changing the terms, really, of what you're putting out in the world. And that's an important conversation we're having in the company, and we're working on what that really means for anybody who's pushing a button to deploy CDF. Certainly in the past, and it's still true going forward, that if you're putting a free CDF out on as a desktop application, you know, you're giving it to somebody to play with the CDF player on their own computer, that's great. We don't, it doesn't cost us anything. You've exported it, you've put it out. They're using their CPU cycles to run this thing. But when you're embedding a CDF in the cloud, in your web page, you're running it on our servers. And the challenge there is to do the right balance between making it an enjoyable and convenient experience for your readership, your audience, your users, and essentially not crushing us with all these CPU cycles that we have to account for. So the approach to that is going to end up being where we will allow some amount of free usage, and there will be a certain threshold at which the user of your CDF transitions to something where they're told to continue further, they have to download, or they have to log into their own cloud account to continue experiencing. I'll get back to questions later. To demonstrate something like that, I've got a bunch of links to some demonstrations that we've been putting together. Stephen previewed some of this in his talk. So the idea is your CDF is sitting on the web, and the normal experience would be that somebody can just use it. Right now with the demonstrations, our plan is to put things up with an animation. That animation is something you would have your audience see after they've used up the free cycles that are available to them. Let me just switch here. This button here is enabling cloud interactivity. So this is the cloud embedded version. This is what your audience would experience on the web. This is a CDF embedded on a web page, and it's hosted by our servers. There's no file that you had to transport or put up on your own servers. Everything is coming from us. But that includes this preview image. So if I've been using this interactive for maybe 20 times and playing around with it, at some point it will do something like that. I'll have used the last interaction that's available to me as a viewer of the web page, and now I'm being told to continue further, download it. That's what this button would do here, or continue in a web account, a cloud account on the Wolfram site. So that's the way forward. And to get to that from using Mathematica or any of our other products, the objective would be to make this export process, and that's what you're going to see in version 11.2. Ian, can we say that? Can I say that 11.2 is where we're going to make this export wizard be the thing that gets you the web, the cloud version of everything? He's waiting for me to do the work, and then I'll give it to him. Yeah, so, okay. I promise you that's what it's going to be, because I have to make it happen. We'll do it. Yeah, we'll do it. Anyway, this is the Cdf Export Wizard. This is what you're using when you want to put a CDF out on the desktop or in the web as an embedded object. I chose the web embedding method. And so you're currently being asked for what you want to save out and where you want to save it. In this case, I'm going to save it to the desktop, which is already confusing, because it's like, wait, I thought I was embedding something on the web, so why are you telling me that I have to save a file out somewhere? So the steps here involve paths, and it's asking you, if you're going to put this CDF on your website, is it going to be nested in another layer deep, or are you going to put it right next to the HTML file that it's being embedded in? In other words, we're exposing too many of the details of what you normally have to do to configure a web server, instead of just making it a streamlined experience like if you're embedding video on YouTube. Finally, at this last step here, you see what the ultimate goal is, and that is to have a blob of code that you simply copy and put on any web page that you want where your content should be embedded. So this process here got us, was a compromise, and And so, here I'm copying this out, and this should have produced output here that is, I didn't give it a name, but here's the CDF file that I produced, and here's a preview image that was created for me in order to support the web preview configuration, and you have to get those files onto your server. Going forward, and I'm saying 11.2, you will push the button to embed your CDF content, and what you'll get back is that code. That's it. You're done. Okay. At that point, that code goes into your website, and it points to our servers where the preview image is on our servers, where the manipulate code is living on our cloud and it's running from our servers. This animation that's being created here might take might not be instantaneous. It might take a bit of effort, and it's something we'll create for you. It's being created on our servers. It's a case where that animation might not show up instantly, but there will be sort of a placeholder that says it's coming, and then eventually it shows up. It's not much different than if you put videos up on YouTube, and it takes a while for the thumbnail images to get processed, and then at some point you can choose one, or you can put up a custom one if you want. We could probably arrange something like that as well. Okay, so that's the primary story of where we're going with how to work with the cloud. I've gone over those details here. I think that it's finally the user experience we really kind of wanted for everyone. It does, there is the compromise of the efficiency of what can be displayed in the cloud, but like I said, it's always getting better. I wanted to bring up something that is perhaps comparable to what we call CDF, and that is just the fact that once we're talking about the cloud, we're talking about things you can do with our technologies that put app-like experiences in front of people on the web that don't necessarily depend on the idea of embedding something necessarily. I mean, when it comes to manipulate objects, you've already seen probably many demos around the company, and when Stephen gives talks, where he's creating a cloud object from the desktop because he's done a cloud deploy of what he's coding in his notebook, and that thing just appears on the web. It doesn't have anything around it. It's not a web page of your own content. It's just that thing. But it's just a demonstration of putting stuff on the web in various different forms. Well, we've got form pages that we can create, and we've got APIs that you can create. We've got HTML templating that's coming together. You've seen previews of the Ask technology, which is essentially a way to create a questionnaire. So things are coming together in a way that you can essentially, create interfaces and applets in web pages, or you could create this content in a way that can be embedded in other web pages, such that you're moving a little bit past just the experience of a block of code or a self-contained applet that you then have to portably move around. You're going right into the web coding experience essentially. So internally in the company, and probably when we gather these, we call these microsites. The idea being that it's like Tumblr is a microblog. It does one thing. It just does one little thing. And it's very much like an app experience, but it's a web page that you go to for that. It doesn't do anything else. It did this one thing that we gave you, and when you're done with that, you move on and go somewhere else. But everything you see displayed here is configured through the cloud deployment that is offered through where we are now with the state-of-the-art technology. So I think it's worth talking about in the same context as when we're talking about CDF. Okay, so let's get back quickly because I'm just about out of time here, and I want to be able to take some questions to just kind of wrap up points. So I've mentioned in previous years portable CDF. I won't go through it again. If anybody has questions about that, they can look me up afterwards. And there's always the talk of what's to come. For quite a few years now, we've been talking about having a CDF player on mobile devices, on iPad. I think we're waiting for the Cubs to win the World Series for this to come out. And I think that is this year, let's hope, right, if I haven't jinxed anything. So for both sides of it. So anyway, we do have something that we are putting into beta very shortly. And then, of course, I always have resource links for where you can get more information about CDF in its current state. All right, I'll stop there, and I'll take questions. Dana, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's no software download required when you're making your content available through the cloud, and the concept of embedding is really just that. Okay, there's the Wolfram cloud, which is a notebook experience on the web, but you're publishing something based on a book style or a bunch of web pages you put together that you like the way those web pages are assembled. You don't want to have to convert those all to notebooks for people to then read them as notebooks. So you can just take the juiciest bits, right? The parts that are the interactives, the dynamic elements that you really like coming out of our technology, because it's the easiest way you have to do that, and you can cut those in to your web page, but they're coming from our cloud servers, and when a user goes to your web page, they're not downloading anything, and that's important for the way forward. Seth, go ahead.
So just so I understand, if I have a WordPress blog, for example, what I'm going to be able to do is make my little manipulate, press export to CDF, it'll generate a snippet of HTML, I stuff that into my WordPress blog, and that's it?
That's it.
I don't have to set up a web server?
Correct, nothing. That's it. I wanted to be there years ago, but we needed all this other infrastructure to support that. Shouldn't, no, I don't think so. I mean, it is the case with WordPress that they try to be very controlling, right, for security reasons and whatnot, of what you can put into it. But when it comes to just an iframe sort of thing, it should be safe. It should be no problem. George.
Did I see that in a portable CDF, you no longer have to install any kind of player whatsoever?
Well, you do, but it's not. What it is, it's just it's a zip file, and you're giving your audience, your customer, a zip file that they unzip, and that's it. Then they're done. They unzip that archive, and they browse to the file that says start here. They click that button, and it opens your CDF file, which to go this far, you probably are doing an application that has a lot of additional resources behind that CDF, or it's a CDF that points to many others. It's like a book, or it's a pretty substantial application with a lot of user interface features, and maybe the first CDF that comes up is just the thing that says welcome. You're now using this application. Start here. Click this button. Well, the point there is, they can be Windows users and they can be Mac users, and it's the same difference. You're giving them the zip file, and you don't have to know what platform they're on. The file gets unzipped. They start the start here, and that's a Java file. It just picks which platform you're on. It recognizes whether you're on Windows or on Mac, and it then opens the Mac or Windows CDF player with that CDF file coming right up. So it's only been in the last few years that Mathematica and CDF Player have been fully copyable from one system to another, without having to have an installer that puts in other DLLs or other details, So by virtue of doing so, you can have this kind of a setup. Now, it works well for CDF Player because there's no license involved. There's no password, there's no machine ID. You couldn't do it with Mathematica because it would start up and say, well, you're on a different machine, what's the new password? So that's why this is possible. But it's big. But again, it fits on a thumb drive, Okay, if there are no other questions, then I'll wrap up here. Thanks.